Those rusty fence posts, good result of my callous hands, like the lone. Howdy, folks. I'm James Talley. Welcome to the Rusty Fence Post podcast, an all-breed podcast where we talk about everything. Today, I'm joined by Bryan Guillory with Frozen Point Kennels. Welcome to the podcast, Bryan.
All right. Thank you for having me on.
Yes, sir. I appreciate you joining us today. You know, I started following you on Instagram. Gosh, it's been a while back, and before I started following you, I'd always kind of I was always interested in the Bourbonnais and just thought it was a really beautiful dog. Uh, did you did you grow up working with dogs, or grow up uh, with dogs when you were a kid? Working dogs, how did that play out for you?
So I grew up down in Louisiana. Live up here in North Dakota now, but I grew up down there. We had a lot of dogs that were pets. We had pit bulls. We had a Weimaraner, some rat terriers, all kind of different breeds, but none of them were really more than pets. I didn't really start getting into anything serious up until I moved up in the North Dakota, and actually just probably about 6, 7 years ago. Um, yeah, before that, I mean, I had a pit bull that would go retrieve squirrels for me, but that was about it as far as me in the hunting world.
That's pretty cool. Uh, I know you're an aspiring Bracknell Bourbonnais kennel. Uh, you've got some really amazing dogs. What made you decide to choose the Bourbonnais?
So when I first got up to North Dakota, I had never pheasant hunted or anything. This is way back in 2003, 2004. And I went out with a buddy of mine, Jason Babachek, and he had a Griff that I don't know. I just thought it was the best dog I'd ever seen in my life, and it was a NABDA prize 2 or 3 dog. It wasn't the greatest dog ever, but at the time, like, and to this day, it was a great meat dog. But I kind of fell in love with it because we went out there, we shot birds over a point, which was fantastic. And then a couple days later, we were out in the duck blind, and this dog had icicles hanging from its beard, and it's hammering retrieves and stuff. And I was like, man, I gotta get me one of these. So I started looking into it. Had kind of a flatland coat, so I started looking into the Griffs, and I couldn't find any that weren't real fluffy. There were breeders that were producing that consistently, and so I kind of looked around a little bit, and eventually I was like, well, 'cause I had some buddies that had German dogs as well, and I kind of wanted something that wasn't quite as hard-headed and listened a little better, a little more cooperative. And I'm a pretty laid back guy, something laid back. And like if I could find something French, because I'm a Cajun down from Louisiana, like I said, it would be it'd be even better. So I started looking into the different Brocks, and I kind of narrowed it down. I kind of wanted a Bracco Italiano because I liked hounds, but my wife was like, "That's the ugliest dog I've ever seen. We're not getting that." So then I went over to I kind of narrowed down to the Braque Francais and the Braque de Bourbonnais, and there had never been. I know I wanted to do NABDA stuff, and there had never been a VC, a versatile champion, um, Braque Francais. And being that I kind of grew up and we had a few pit bulls and stuff, I kind of liked the stockier look of the Bourbonnais over the more sleek look of the um, Braque Francais. And everybody I knew with the Braque Francais, like constantly were getting like, "Hey, that's a nice short hair you got," you know. So I wanted something that was a little more distinct looking, and I kind of settled on the Braque de Bourbonnais, and I found a breeder, Lon, at Elk Run Kennels out of Idaho, and he had pretty much the only VCs going out there. There was two of them at the time. There's still only two. And then the male I ended up getting from him, Possum, had both those VCs in his line, so that made me want to go through him. Um, yeah, and that's I think I waited like almost 2 years on a waiting list because he was the only one that was producing dogs like that. So now I got Possum, and he's probably one of the best Bourbonnais out there. He's fantastic.
That's awesome. Can you give me a little bit of history on the breed, where the breed originated from, what obviously what the dog was bred for?
So there's records of it all the way back in the Renaissance era, like 1500s, 1600s type, like way back when. But then the dog kind of almost died out during World War II, and then kind of came back a little bit, and then after World War III, it really kind of died out and almost pretty much went extinct. And then there was actually no Bourbonnais registered between I think it was 63 and 73 or something like that. But there was a guy, I'm gonna butcher his name. Is Michael Comte. It's like Comte. I don't know. It should be French. I should be able to pronounce this stuff. But anyway, he kind of took it upon himself to kind of go out and search the countryside over in France and try to find as many dogs that looked and acted like the Bourbonnais he could find, and there wasn't any that were pretty much full blood anymore. So he went and took all these half breeds and he started breeding them, and then he got a group of other people and they just started breeding them. So I think it was 73 when he first started that, and then I don't think there was even a breed club up until early 80s. But it's been slowly kind of making a progression, making a comeback. There's usually at any given time somewhere around 1,000, 1,200 in the world. And yeah, here in America, there's only a handful of breeders, and even overseas. And there's a lot of show in the breeds overseas. I mean, the breeders overseas, they're doing a lot of show over there. So it's kind of hard looking around trying to find dogs that are from hunting lines over there. But yeah, everything basically started from a handful of dogs back in uh, mid 70s.
I know you. I know you. I know you're a NABDA judge, and you travel all over the country, judging these different breeds of dogs in the NABDA system. Do you see many Bourbonnais within the testing system?
So I've judged at this point between apprenticing and judging probably 500 dogs or so. I've judged a lot of dogs, and I've never actually got to judge a Bourbonnais. I mean, there's so few of them out there, and there's so few people that are actually running a NAVDA. It's just never lined up. I even took a 1 day test down in Nebraska because there's a breeder down there with Roughneck, and just to hope that she was going to run a dog, but she ended up not running a dog in that test. Just so I was hoping to see one other than see a test anyway, other than my own. I've seen some other ones just not testing yet, but yeah, I'm hoping that over the next few years we can start getting a few more people to test their dogs in the system.
So why do you think that is? Is it just because there's just so few of these dogs out there and there's only so many breeders producing them? Is that would that probably be a good explanation as to why they're not you just don't see a whole lot of them testing?
Yeah, you don't see a whole lot of them testing. I think there's only maybe 6 breeders here in the States, something like that. And not all of them test their dogs. And then those few that do test their dogs, I just haven't got the line up with that. But there's usually just a handful a year that get tested at the NA level, and then even less so at the utility level. So I think right now there's my male who's fantastic. Unfortunately, he's sterile, so I think he was the last utility dog that was breeding. So I don't think there's any Bourbonnais out there with a utility title that are actually breeding right now. So a lot of the breeders that have been doing it for a real long time kind of retired. So it's going to be up to us newer breeders to take this dog back to where it can be.
That's really interesting. I know you mentioned, that possum is tested in utility and then went on to the invitational. What was that experience like? Uh, I know that had to have been an amazing accomplishment, obviously, but can you tell us a little bit about that experience?
Uh, yeah. For utility, we had been training. He was 2.5 years old, like 2 years, 7 months, something like that. And I tested at my test, and there's a fire up in Canada. I'm only like half hour from the Canadian border, but there's a fire up there, and it was real smoky. The conditions weren't great, and he was just having a bad day in the field. We ended up with a prize to that day. But at lunchtime there, we weren't even done with the test. I was calling another chapter of me of mine over in Fargo that's about 4.5 hours away that heard they had a test spot. And I was like, hey, can you get me in? I've got a dog here that's good enough to get a prize one. It ain't happening today. So I was able to squeeze in over there. And then I think it was 8 days later, he went from like a 171 prize two to a 204, which is the max score prize one. And that day it was pouring rain, everything. He had the day that I knew he could have. So yeah, 2.5, uh, he was there, and then at 3.5 is when we tested for the invitational. And leading up to it, um, I was so nervous, and we don't have a lot of people in our chapter that have ever been to the invitational, so I didn't know a whole lot what to expect. And I was working on these blinds. So for the people who don't know, the invitational, it's like 100 to 120 yards across open water. You got to send your dog on a blind retrieve. And I had been, he was doing those just fine, and I wanted to be prepared for it. So I started pushing him out like 200 yards, and it just wasn't fun for him. So for this breed, they have to really, you got to really slow down what you're doing because it has to stay fun, or they'll just shut down. And he started shutting down, and then I kind of backed off, and I thought he was going to do it for the invitational, but we went and it ended up being backing in the field right the first event that got us. He backed the first dog beautifully, and after that, he was like, "Well, he'd never interfere with another dog, but he would just see the other dog and keep hunting, doing his own thing." But so that backing ended up getting us in the first event there. And then we went to the blind retrieve, not the blind retrieve. We went to the double mark. So they throw two ducks out, and there's some distraction and stuff. And we tested in Ohio, and there's like it's really, really clear water where all the water here is pretty mucky, and it's a gradual drop off way. You kind of drop straight off over there. And he saw that clear drop off, and he kind of looked at me when I sent him for the fetch, like, you want me to jump off of that, just it wasn't real thing. I kind of hacked at him. He went out and did the thing, but after that, he was shut down. So when we got to the blind, like, he put his feet in the water, but he was done for the day. So I kind of knew where we were. So the judges were like, man, you're really calm for a dog that's not doing what he's supposed to do. I'm like, we're just enjoying the experience at this time. And the judges there were great. The people, everybody was super supportive. And I think almost everybody who saw me with Possum just stopped me and wanted to get pictures. They're like, oh, I've never seen that dog. He's so beautiful. Because he's just a fantastic looking dog. And he's everything you want from the breed. As far as confirmation, I think he's got an extra tooth. It's like a 205 or 405, something like that. But something that really doesn't affect anything. But other than that, his confirmation is pretty much perfect, and he's just fantastic in the field. So like I said, everybody was supportive. My brace mate was fantastic, really cooperating with me, and we were set together, read scores, and I was, even though I knew we weren't going to get there, we're high fiving, having a great day. So I really love the atmosphere over there. How everybody was really kind of cheering for each other and kind of just want everybody wants everybody else to get that BC title, and it's the same thing at the other NABDA tests that everybody wants everybody to come out there with the perfect score, and it's just it really kind of reaffirmed on why I do NABDA, even though we had a bad day. Hold on. Sorry, I got two girls in heat right now, so
Oh no, that's no problem.
yeah, but yeah, it was a fantastic experience, really. Even though we didn't have a great day, the whole thing, I'm really glad I went.
That's really awesome. You know, the first time I saw Possum, and it was, you know, he was locked up facing the camera, and I was like, wow, that is a fantastic looking dog. And I'm glad you touched base on that. I was going to ask you, that was my next question. I was going to ask you, you know, obviously, you know, I figured that not a lot of people knew what he was. I was just going to ask you uh, what they were going to ask you as far as what kind of breed of dog he was.
Uh, I get a lot of different things. Some people ask me if he's a short hair. He's like, oh, they're like, oh, that's a really odd looking short hair. Some people they know Brock, so they're like, oh, is that a Brock Francais? Or I even get a lot of uh, English pointers. Like, oh, what'd you do with that pointer's tail? Like, because their tails are super short. They're docked way shorter than a, like a typical short hair or anything like that. I mean, you're talking, usually after the first two joints, so you only got, a couple inches of tail. Almost Possum's got almost none. He's got probably like one or two joints in there, but yeah, and they're so stocky too that most people don't. Even when I tell them what they are, even sometimes in the NABDA world, and I'm like, oh, this is what I run. They're like, oh, what's that? I got to pull up pictures and show them what it is because I just don't know. There's just not that many of them.
How many dogs are there worldwide? Would you happen to know a estimate on that number?
I don't have exact number, but it usually fluctuates between 1,000 and 1,200, somewhere in that range.
So they a very small gene pool then.
Yeah, there's definitely a small gene pool, and as a breeder, it makes it difficult trying to find dogs to breed to that aren't related and that also have the quality you're looking for. And my possum's a fantastic dog. Lon isn't breeding anymore, so when I first got into breeding, I thought that all the Bourbonnais were going to be like him. Like every Bourbonnais is fantastic, and these test scores weren't great and stuff, but that's because people don't know what they're doing. And as I started seeing more of them, and I got two more, I realized I just got really lucky with him. And there really isn't, at least here in the U.S. and a lot overseas too, there isn't a big selection of just fantastic Bourbonnais. So that's definitely a challenge as a breeder. You can't just, it's not like with a short hairs or wire hairs, something like that. Like I can just grab any stud and he's going to be a pretty fantastic dog. I'm not going to be able to, you're generally not going to find a complete dog, the one that has everything. So you're looking for, okay, what is my female lacking and what do I need to pair that with it that hopefully the next generation it's going to come out with the dog is a little bit better than do the same thing each generation. So but it makes it really difficult whenever you have such a small gene pool. I mean, you're talking about a breed that's only been around essentially since the 70s, even though it's been around since the 1500s because it was pretty much gone. So it's very bottlenecked, and additionally, over in France, where almost all these dogs pretty much came from. I mean, if you can go back two or three generations, and you're in dogs in France, and pretty much every single dog out there. But there were several studs that got used that were very good, and so they got used a lot. So you have to really pay attention to make sure that not just on the first or second or third generation that you're looking back and then it's not too close even back there, you'll notice that a lot of the same dogs will appear in a lot of the pedigrees.
So I'm assuming are a lot of these dogs line bred, or they're particularly some of them inbred?
Yeah, for the most part, a lot of them are very line bred. It's almost you almost can't get away from it. And then there's a few breeders overseas that have they do it very carefully, but there's been some inbred dogs, breeding half siblings together and stuff. But the breeders that do that, at least they do it well. They're very careful with it, and they're very selective about which one of those puppies they're going to use to breed. Um, but there definitely is some of that inbreeding. Not so much here in the U.S. It's definitely a lot more frowned upon here in the U.S. to do inbreeding, but there is some line breeding. With mine, I'm trying to not necessarily line breed because I don't think there's enough of them out there um, to do it and also promote genetic diversity within the breed. So I may not get quite as good dogs, but I'll still get some good average dogs. But at the same point, I want to try to get that genetic diversity out, and if I can improve at the same time, that's kind of my goal is to improve the breed and the genetic diversity all in the same go. But with the bell curve and you're breeding dogs that aren't close, a lot of times those dogs are going to be towards the middle of how the breed averages. That's just the way it works, and you'll get some outliers that are great, and then hopefully you can take those outliers and those are your breeding stock.
Right. That makes perfect sense. I know when I first met you, you told me about the flush, and you were a guest on there. And I work a lot of nights, so I've actually watched that episode. I probably watched it 4 or 5 times. It was really a neat seeing how you guys hunted that island and just the whole experience. I really enjoyed it. But can you touch base on that experience? How that uh, all came about?
Sure. So I've hunted Mallard Island out there for years, and for you guys that haven't seen the show, it's a 2 by 4 mile island in the middle of Lake Skakawea, which is a big reservoir here in kind of the central part of the state. And Pheasants Forever, Game and Fish, and Ducks Unlimited, mainly Ducks Unlimited, kind of manage it, and got lots of pheasants and everything out there. But it's definitely a public area, and you're gonna hardcover, and you're definitely gonna work for the birds. But Travis from the Flush, he's good friends with Tyler Webster from the Birds, Booze, and Buds podcast, and pretty good friend with them. And he had never originally he wanted to do the podcast with Tyler out. I mean, not a podcast, the show with Tyler out there. But Tyler's like, hey, I've never really hunted this, and I'm not available that weekend. But hey, I've got these two friends of mine, me and my buddy Jason Babachek, and he's like, hey, like reach out to them, see if they want to do it. And he reached out, and he's always kind of when I was growing up, always wanted to be like on a hunting TV show or a fishing TV show, like kind of be a host or whatever. And I was like, man, that would be fantastic. So he came out, and it was so brutally cold that day. Like it was there for 3 days, but it, it doesn't do it justice on the camera, just how cold. I mean, the ambient temperature was around zero, and the wind chill was probably -20 out there. And it's coming right off that water too. So it is just cold. We hopped all in the boat and drove across, and then we kind of were pulling up, and it was freezing coming across the water. And Charlie's like, "All right, we're gonna let the cameraman out." I'm like, well, "We're not getting out." And he's like, "No, no, no." Sorry, Travis. And so we pulled the boat back away so they could get a shot of us coming in, um, stuff like that. And then you know, when we shoot a bird, you'd have to kind of stop and talk about it, and meanwhile there's birds running away and flying out, but you have to kind of stop. So it was a fantastic experience, but I'm super glad I did it, and I wouldn't mind doing it again. But I definitely, after filming the show, I definitely wouldn't want to do that for a living. It was just you have to kind of stop, look for the cameraman to get up, and man, that cameraman he put in some miles that day because he'd constantly run up ahead and running back and back and forth and stuff. And the hunt, I mean, we found probably 100 hens that day, and they were fleshing way out, and the dogs were working, but it was definitely rough. And towards the end, like it finally paid off, and like Possum nailed a point on a rooster and a hen pheasant, and got up and got a nice retrieve out of it and everything. So that was pretty fun. It was pretty scary that day. My buddy Jason's dog, his blood sugar just dropped. Never happened before, but we have been prepping for the show. We've been hunting pretty hard, so we hunted. And Possum was the skinniest I think he's ever been during the show because we were hunting for probably 2 weeks, like almost every day, just putting miles in, trying to make sure we had everything set up for the show. We're gonna have 5 birds for it and stuff, and man, like that dog went into shock kind of and started shaking and got to him, took the collar off, and I'm hollering for Jason and stuff. And they cut a lot of it out in the show. I didn't. They weren't even sure they were going to put it in there because it could potentially put people off. But we did everything right, and the dog was just fine. And by the end of the day, like shoot, maybe an hour later, that dog was pulling, ready to go hunt again. We got some food in him, a little bit of honey, and he was good to go. At the time, it was pretty scary, and it captured that a little bit, but it was pretty good. And then, yeah, so Mallard Island was a good time. Lots of birds. They were hard to get to. And then the second day, we hunted, I think it was some plots land. So for plots up here, it's private land, open to hunter. I don't know, but open to sportsmen. That's what it is. But it's basically private land that is open to the public for hunting. So we wanted to kind of keep that theme to the show. Originally, we were going to hunt snow geese, but it just didn't work out. They were all on the big water and it didn't work out. So we went and we hunted that, and I think Jason's dog caught 2 cripples out of there that we didn't even shoot. So I think Travis had more than half his limit without even firing a gun. But hunting heavy, thick cattails, and we found some birds, and that was a pretty good time. They got it a little bit on the show, but both Answer, there was a big covey of birds, and Answer, which is my buddy's dog, and Possum were both locked up like right next to each other on separate birds, and it was fantastic when we were flushing them out one at a time. Of course, they were hens, so we were waiting. But that day also, I there was a bird that flushed out. I spun around and I shot it. Well, it was kind of behind us, and the cameraman fell over. So you're like, oh, we missed the shot. Like, hey, can we get you just shoot over there and we'll use that. So that was a little bit odd, just kind of shooting off into nothing so they could get a picture of a shot. But yeah, throughout the whole thing, there was a whole lot of kind of having to like kind of redo things a little bit just so that they could get the right shot. There's only one cameraman, and said it was a fantastic experience. It was neat getting to see that on the show, getting to talk about nabs a little bit and the dogs, and getting to do it with one of my best friends. So if you ever get a chance to especially if you get to do it with Travis, like take advantage of it. I thought he was gonna, be some like Hollywood type guy and be, super kind of stuck up. But he is one of the nicest people I ever met and just really down to earth and yeah, just a great guy overall.
I was amazed, kind of when they went to the intro of that island, and they were showing all the birds, and you guys loading dogs up and getting in the boat, and I was freezing just watching that, you guys going across the water. I mean, I'm down in South Texas, and I have no idea what that kind of cold feels like, but I know y'all work really hard there was lots of birds, but they seemed they were wild. They were y'all were constantly on the move, but it looked like an amazing experience.
Yeah. So when they were doing the kind of Q&A part, they wanted the lake as the backdrop because that was kind of the central focus of it. And it was still freezing cold. It was in the negatives, and I pretty much had like a sweatshirt on, and I was freezing. I was so cold I couldn't even hardly think straight to get my answers, and it took all I could just to have my teeth not chattering. I mean, it was they did some pretty good editing because I was freezing. It was definitely cold, and like I said, I've been up here for like 19 years now, and man, like it gets cold in the winter. And that was definitely for a November day. It was an early November day. It was super cold, but there wasn't anybody else on the lake or on the island, so that was nice. But yeah, so they've got those birds out there. Like when I say it's public land, they're not out there releasing birds or anything like that. They have fantastic habitat set up with food plots and everything you could ever think of. And there's not that many predators out there because it's on the island. There's a few coyotes, but it's just not as heavy as far as predators as some of the other areas around there. And they've got good cover for the winter's cat cells and hedgerows and all the food. Like they have all the corn and wheats and soybean and all that out there on the island, and they don't even harvest this. All that food is there for them to eat. So it's pretty much a bird's paradise other than getting shot at and stuff. So all those birds are pretty much grown on the island, in the wild. So it's not some like released birds that you're going out. It's not like a glorified training situation. And those birds by November are pressured pretty darn hard, so it definitely makes it challenging. And just the thickets that they're in with the big thorns and stuff, Russian olive and stuff like that, it's definitely hard on the dogs. It's not a place I would hunt, but a few times a year because it'll tear your dogs up a little bit.
Is that public hunting, that area that y'all hunted at on that island?
Yeah, so that whole island is public hunting. I said it's a 2 by 4 mile island, and all around there on the bank is Army Corps land and also a wildfire management area. It's a Wolf Creek. So there's still plenty of birds in the Wolf Creek area, which is basically the edge of the lake. Um, but since you don't need a boat or anything to get there, it gets pressured even more. But the island, it doesn't get quite as bright. It used to be a lot better. It used to go in there and just hammer birds, but since it is public, anyone can go in there. So a lot of guides started bringing big hunting parties of 15, 20 people in there, and yeah, some of them don't have great etiquette. I'll put it that way. They'll like cut you right off, even though they don't, because they're doing it for money, bringing all these guys out there. So you'll see people with pink and yellow, all kind of different colors, vests and stuff, and those generally are out of state people coming. But it's still with all those birds having to deal with that, it really makes it more challenging. I think if you can get out there once it gets cold, when no one wants to be on a boat anymore, like usually the islands, and it's not very crowded. You're not like waiting or anything. You get out there, you might run into one other hunter by the time you get into November, which is why they kind of wanted to do it that late.
For sure. That was really awesome to see, and I really enjoyed it. Uh, does the Bourbonnais breed in general have any major health issues? And for somebody who's considering that breed to add to their family, is health testing important?
So there's not a lot of health issues with the Bourbonnais. Um, a little bit of fertility issues here and there. If you're just having it for your family, that's not an issue. Um, and then I think there was one or two dogs that, I mean, when you're talking about only a handful of dogs being out there, it gets everyone's attention. There's a handful of dogs that had a kind of a skin thing going on, and Um, there was, I think, one or two dogs out there that had like a heart issue, but in general, it's a pretty healthy breed. Um, but if you're going to breed, I definitely think that like I test for hips and elbow dysplasia, the eyes, the heart, all the stuff, just because I don't want those issues to creep into the breed. You keep having great testing and you do all that, um, you're you're much more likely to keep those genetic issues out, along with trying to not inbreed and not line breed too close. But that's usually where you start having a bunch of issues pop up. But in general, yes, very healthy breed, and yeah, I said I test all mine. They're not a really big dog. Like you're talking of, I have one female that's 38 pounds, and then my male is kind of big for the breed. He's not out of standard, but he's at the top of it, and he's maybe 55 pounds. So with a relatively mid-sized dog there, you don't run into a whole lot of hip dysplasia issues anyway, just because of the size. Um, but yeah, I think it's definitely, especially with the hip dysplasia, so many breeds are prone to that, that make sure that gets out of there. And then if you have dogs that have health issues, making sure that those aren't breeding and then trying to trace it back to which dogs you can find, that came out of as best you can.
Yes, sir, for sure. Do you only, I know you judge within the NABDA system. Do you only test in the NABDA system?
That's all I've done so far. Um, I'm active duty Air Force. I'm retiring now, but my job keeps me pretty busy, so I only have barely enough time to do one test organization for now. But we're retiring here real soon, and I plan on eventually doing a little bit of AKC. I did a HRC, the like lab hunt stuff with possum one time, just because we got invited out there, and we almost passed. I think he was 6 months old, and in order to pass for that, you have to the duck has to come completely out of the water. You got the duck 6 inches from the edge of the water and dropped it, and just didn't want to pick it up. I felt really bad, but then there was the lab people there, which surprised me, that had 2, 3 year old dogs that couldn't get a pass, and they've been trying years and years. And I was like, man, this is easy stuff. But and then I just never went back for it, and it's more of like the UKC type stuff. But yeah, I eventually want to do maybe a little bit of Nastra, because dogs run real big, and I think they do great at it. And then some AKC stuff in the future. I think it would be fun just to occupy my time a little bit.
Definitely, and certainly more exposure for the breed as well. Uh,
Exactly.
how does the Bourbonnais compare to a short hair or a hair, or I know you mentioned earlier you hunted behind a Griffon. How does the Bourbonnais somewhat compare to other versatile breeds within NABDA?
So the biggest thing with the Bourbonnais, and kind of the biggest draw for them, is they aim to please, and they have a major off switch. Like I've got 3 dogs sitting around me right now, all taking a nap, even though I was out training with some other people when I came home smelling like birds. They were a little excited right at first, and then they settled down. So um, with the Bourbonnais, like when they're in the field, it's all business. They're ready to go. Like great running dogs. They don't have quite the drive as some of those like wire hair, especially like your draughts or your DKs and stuff like that. But they have still have really good drive, but it's not overpowering, so it makes it a little bit easier for steadiness and stuff like that for training. Um, but where it's more difficult is they don't have quite as much drive. So like for NAVDA, we do like the duck search, where they go out there for 10 minutes and keep searching for the duck that they've never seen, and they can't quit and all that. And those dogs are so cooperative that a lot of times they'll come back early. So um, with possum, when I duck hunt, I'll shoot a bird, and if I can't he doesn't mark it very good, I'll send him over there and he looks for a few minutes and then he turns around and stares at me and he wants me to send him in a direction. And that's how we hunt. So when we got to duck search for the testing system, you can't do that. So like he turned around and stared at me, came back and set and almost came all the way to me, and I just kept staring out and didn't say anything to him. And he went back out and didn't quite make it to me, and then went and found the duck, did a great duck search and found the duck. But the breed really aims to please. And then I'd say a lot of the difference, besides looks, of course, in size, as far as your short hairs go, is your temperament. So with your German breeds and your short hairs and stuff, they can take a lot and bounce back. So if you're a little bit too heavy-handed, uh, or you really get after them, or you make something and it's not fun or whatever, they can recover from that and it's fine. With the Bourbonnais, I mean, there's outliers, of course, but in general, with the Bourbonnais, if you hammer on that dog will shut down. I remember I was training for the Invitational, and we were training, I think, backing or something, and I got after him, and he just shut down. We got home, he went and sat in the kennel. I didn't fry him, I just yelled at him, and he literally just shut down. He was done for the day. And the next day he was fine, but that's just the way the breed is. They can't take any kind of really heavy correction, and but you have to make correction. So that's the balancing act with the breed, is trying to make the correction but not have it be too harsh of a correction. Make it count but not turn the dog off. And you have to kind of see how each dog is to be able to do that. But the breed works really good if you can make it enjoyable for the breed. So before I tested possum a year and a half on UPT, which is like the utility preparatory test. It's an intermediate test. It's really more for the handler to kind of learn how the more advanced stuff is and nabbed than it is for the dog. But he was retrieving pretty good, but he'd come back and he'd drop it at my feet and stuff. And I was trying to clean that up, which for that test is okay. But I was trying to clean that stuff up, so I started train retrieve or force fetch. And after a couple of weeks, like he wouldn't even pick a bird up, like he just would not do it. And I think I was 2 weeks out from the test, and I'm like, man, I don't know what I'm gonna do. And I went out in the backyard with a frozen chucker that had thawed a little bit, and we've just played fetch like it was a ball. No pressure, no nothing, just having a good time. And from that day on, no issues with retrieve whatsoever. I mean, he was like, "Oh, this is fun again. I can do it." But when it wasn't fun, he was not going to do it. He just shut down, wasn't going to do anything. But as soon as I made it fun again, he was all about it. So that's something that if you're used to the German dogs and training them, and the Americans kind of have adopted a lot of the German training methods, so you can't approach it in that same way. The French have a more of a um, philosophy that the dog kind of trains itself, so you kind of let the dog figure it out. And so the German dogs are bred to handle the German training, whereas the French dogs are bred more towards that French training mindset. So they can't handle you when you're yelling at them from across the field or anything like that.
That makes complete sense. What other breeds do you enjoy besides the Bourbonnais?
So being a nav, that I get to see a ton of dogs, and every breed out there pretty much. Like, and people ask me all the time, because I see so many dogs, like, oh, what's the best breed? And I always tell them all of them. Like, what do you mean all of them? Well, each breed is the best in its own way and for a certain type of handler. So my buddy Jason, he's got a draught, which is the German version of the German hair pointer. And that breed for me wouldn't fit. And because you got to be, let's say it's heavy handed, but you got to be really, really stern with them. And I'm just too laid back of a guy for that. And, I probably wouldn't do as well with that breed when he probably wouldn't do as well with my breed. And it suits our personalities better. And some dogs, generally, like you'll see some breeds out there that are not every dog, but a lot of them are really good at tracking. And then, but when they do their field work, they're maybe not as staunch on point and stuff like that. But it's great to see this such a wide diversity, and they're all accomplishing the same thing. They're all pointing, they're all doing all this stuff. But if I wasn't planning on breeding, and I'd probably have a lot of different breeds of dogs to tell you the truth, but I only have so much room and so much time. But uh, if I wasn't breeding, I'd always have a Bourbonnais, but I would probably still have a Bracco Italiano, a Brac Francais, and then I'm really interested in it's like a Portuguese uh, dog. I
Is
can't
it
think of the name of it, but it looks like a Brac de Bourbonnais and uh, Bracco Italiano had a love child. And I think they're just kind of really neat dogs. And there's only a handful of them in the U.S. But said if I had an opportunity and had the time and space, I would definitely own one just kind of try it out. I'd love to just kind of go through a bunch of the breeds and kind of see what it is, which one I'd like a little more of this. But when you're breeding, you kind of have to narrow in on a dog, especially if you want to do it justice, especially with a dog that there's only a handful of and really needs a lot of development. Um, I want to build this breed better. I can really only have one breed at a time, I think.
exactly? Uh, touching base I know you were talking about breeding. What are your goals for your kennel? I know you mentioned Possum was possibly sterile, and he's done amazing. Within the NABDA testing system, and he's just a great dog for you. What are your plans going forward?
So that was a lot of my plan was Possum because he's such a fantastic dog, and everybody, like not just here in the U.S. but even overseas, like everybody wanted a Possum puppy. Well, because everybody wanted that into their lines. But then, I've bred him 3, 4 times now, and he's got nothing, and he's almost 7 now. So at this point, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense for me to to go out and because it's about 8 hours to the closest place I can get him tested at and stuff, and all the money and stuff for that. So he's going to be a fantastic hunting dog, but he won't be a part of my breeding program, unfortunately. But I've got these two imported females. One's from France and one's from Czech Republic, but added two dogs that were bred in France. Added two Pet de Carol dogs. Um, so now that I'm retired and I've got a little more time for it, I'm never gonna have a huge kennel because I want that one-on-one time with the dogs, and I don't think I could have if I had a huge kennel. I wouldn't get that with them. Um, so eventually, I plan on having 5, 6 dogs, something like that. Not huge, but none of my females, none of them are perfect. So what I want to do is go out and scour the different males out there that have what my females are lacking. So I've got this little girl from France, Butter, and she doesn't have a whole lot of natural retrieve. And a lot of people in France, this dog was bred for partridge. They're bred or field dog. They're not bred to be a versatile dog. So I do that. That's my game, but that's not really in their breeding. Um, yeah, they like them to retrieve, but it's not really an emphasis. So, but I want that out of my dogs that I'm going to be breeding. So I went out and I found a male. out of Montana. It's Cactus Country Trigger, I think is his name. But I was judging a test out there, and uh, the lady who owns him, Ann, wasn't she wasn't running a test, but she was the test secretary and running around, and she had her dogs there. And she's, hey, can you come, you know, just give me, what do you think of my dogs? And I went and watched her two dogs run, and her one that was a little bit younger at the time, Trigger, I saw a whole lot of potential in him, and he's retrieving, and um, he may need a little bit more on his duck search, but he's got what, and he's really, really friendly. So with the Bourbonnais, a lot of them are really aloof. They're not necessarily the friendliest dogs. So I wanted to find another friendly dog to breed her to as well. So this is for my, oh shoot, yeah, this is for Prairie. Never mind, that I got set up this fall. Butters in the spring. Sorry for that. But yeah, I wanted that friendly dog to breed to, and lots of natural retrieving this dog. It's got, I wouldn't say the dog is perfect, but it has what my dog is lacking with Prairie. That's the one I'm breeding this fall. And her problem is she's a little bit sensitive. So that dog isn't so sensitive, can handle, as far as Bourbonnais is concerned, can handle the pressure a little bit. So that's one of the reasons I went with that one. And it's got pretty decent conformation and everything. So I think it's going to be a decent breeding, and we'll kind of see. It'll be hopefully my first one that actually takes here, and we'll see how the pups come. And ideally, what I would like to do, since I only have a handful of dogs and only have room for a handful of dogs, I'd like to place dogs with people in the local area or people that I can trust to, and then come back and evaluate those dogs and possibly breed back to those dogs, even though I don't necessarily own them, but just so I can see a whole lot, have a lot more of my lines out there that I have the option to breed back to if I want. But that'd be the greatest thing to be able to do.
That's really awesome. Uh, is obviously uh the gene pool is small. There's not a lot of Bourbonnais out there. Yeah, you touched base a while ago that uh you know the breed is coming back from what happened through World War II or what have you. But what do you think the outlook of the breed looks like? Do you think through the coming years we'll see more and more of this breed?
Um, so it's hard to say. I don't know if the breed is heading in the right direction or wrong direction right now. You've had such really good breeders that are retired and aren't doing it and have so much knowledge. And so some of the young, I won't say young, but some of the people who are kind of taking it over now, I think it's on us. And I've been working with a few other kennels, and we're trying to do the right things and working on when we import dogs, trying to import dogs that our other dogs aren't related to. So we're increasing the genetic diversity here, as well as trying to test some of those dogs and just generally kind of working together. Because we just don't have, you know, 20, 30 years of knowledge, like some of the people that came before us. Um, so it's hard to say which direction we're going to. I'm hoping that I can have an influence and bring it to the right direction, but it's going to take more than me and more than just one or two other breeders that I'm working with here. But like I said, hopefully I can get some puppies and some other people's homes that I trust that they can that will test their dogs and remain intact, and kind of grow that base. Um, there's also, so the Bourbonnais is not, you can register them through AKC, but they're just through the foundation stock services. So for the show, you can't earn titles or anything. So I think we have enough dogs registered. None of mine are registered with AKC, but I think there's enough registered out there that we could get them. We would have to set up an initial show and then um, take the standard from the SCI standard, so the international standard, and put that into like the American, how AKC writes their standard. Take that and transit it over so you can keep the same standard, but have it written the way they write it. But I don't know, personally, I've seen what the show has done to some of the other breeds, so I'm kind of hesitant on really pushing for that. But if we did bring the show people into the world, it would be more Bourbonnais out there in the world. I just don't know if it would make them better as hunting companions or not. So we're gonna keep looking at that. Me and a couple other breeders, and then together we may decide to bring it full AKC, and we'll see. But um, I mean, so the Bourbonnais can run through that FSS stuff. They can run hunt tests and stuff. So that's the reason why it was set up through the FSS so that we could do hunt tests. But yeah, it's hard to say which direction this breed is heading, but hopefully through the efforts of myself and some other people, we can potentially get there with where this breed needs to be. Because as of right now, there are a handful of good dogs, but a lot of them uh, aren't quite where I think the breed can be and where I would like it to be. That's for sure.
Yes, sir. And I know the Bracco Italiano just was brought into the regular AKC from the foundation stock, and I have a couple friends who uh, breed Broncos, and they said no sooner than it was brought in, their phone started ringing off the hook and everybody wanted them. So whether the Bourbonnais, I guess everybody has an opinion on it and it's subjective, but from what I've seen with AKC, it can be. I'm sure there's pros, but there's a whole lot of cons to it as well. So, uh,
Yeah, it would definitely help with the popularity, and then I mean, if you got into the show stuff, you could charge a lot more dollars with the like the Brat Francais. People are charging like $2,200 to $2,500 for the dog, and that's a dog that's got around the same amount of dogs, maybe a handful more than the Braque Bourbonnais, but most of the breeders are only charging around $1,500. I like the idea of keeping it low so that everyday guy can still get out there and have a good hunting dog. So there's that in there as well. Um, but most of over in France, pretty much all the dogs before they breed or do some kind of show stuff. Like my girl Prairie that I'm breeding this fall, both her parents are like world champions, different years and stuff. Um, but they also had some hunting lines in there, which was why I pulled the trigger on the breeding. But and most people are getting dogs overseas, or those dogs are only a few generations removed. So the show is still there, the confirmation is still there. If breeders are being responsible and they're not breeding dogs that have major faults, then I think we'll be okay as far as confirmation wise. So I definitely do get the argument on how the shows can keep your confirmation where it needs to be. I'm just worried about the hunting aspect of the dog. And since they have such a soft temperament, I'm worried about them getting too popular before the breed is right. And then once you get a bunch of backyard breeders breeding them because they can probably sell them for a bunch of money at that point, then you know you already got a dog that's got a super soft temperament, and then people who don't know what they're doing are going to take these dogs and uh, it could be look bad for the Bourbonnais. You know, if they're breeding dogs that have really iffy temperaments and stuff like that. So we'll see where it goes. I'm not so much worried about the show people ruining the breed, just that it gets too popular and backyard breeders ruining it. It's nothing against the show people.
Right. And that makes perfect sense. And that's kind of in a way, I mean, I know down in my area, especially if you go a couple hours south of me, I mean, there's groups you can go on social media and they're selling short hairs for 400 or 500 bucks. And obviously there's no checking of hips or health testing. It really hurts the breed when there's no purposeful breeding being done. So I completely understand where you're coming from. Bryan, I really appreciate your time. This has been awesome. I really have enjoyed having you on and just learning more about the breed and in your program. So thank you for being on the show today.
All right, thank you for having me. And so let me just add, if anyone wants a Bourbonnais, do your research. The breed is not for everybody. Um, just do your research and know what you're getting, because you're going to get a dog that's going to be soft and that can't take a heavy hand, and you need to be prepared to do lots of socialization with the dog and to really take your time. If you just think you're getting a different looking short hair, that's not going to be the case. So do your research, and if you think the breed is right for you and you approach it right, you're going to have a nice dog.
There you go. And guys, that's somebody who lives with these dogs day in and day out, has tested within the NAVDA system as high as you can take a dog within that testing system. So very wise words. Again, Bryan, thank you. We appreciate having you on. And if you want to find out more information about Bryan's program, you can find him on Instagram and Facebook at Frozen Point Kennels. Uh, Again, thanks, Bryan. We appreciate you.
All right, thanks for having me.
Yes, sir.